What do you think is the root cause?
We have a natural biological design, right? We call it our primal design. Our body is designed to be aligned in a certain way. It's meant to be aligned with like the natural earth cycles in a certain way. Anytime you stray from that primal design, that's when you invite disease.
Welcome to the Wellness Amazon podcast, where we talk about everything body, mind, and spirit, health, and wellness. No subject is taboo here, and we have fun peeling back all the layers. Let's do this.
Well, welcome, everybody, to a new episode of the Wellness Amazon podcast. Today on the show, we're going to talk about something that I absolutely love. Yes, we're going to talk about health and longevity. And I have someone on the show who has, I think, a lot of principles that align with my own because I always look at what would a caveman do, right? And today we have Dr. Kavin on the show. I'm so glad you're here. And he is an author and he has worked in the medical field for a long time. And he has so much wisdom to share with us today about exactly that. How can we live better, longer lives? So, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Melina. Glad to be here.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you and how did you get there? Because I know you have had a great growing up. You were exposed to different cultures and you learned so much from that too. And you got a lot of experience just to see people as people and how different they are and how different they live. But I want to know more.
Absolutely. Melina, I come from the imaging background. By profession, I'm a neuroradiologist,
Hmm.
which for people, I guess the best definition is somebody that looks at brains and spines, looking at stroke imaging and brain tumors and all that. But I look at the whole body. And when I started as a radiologist, as a resident, and I remember first day showing up as a resident, and I saw all this young people in their 30s and 40s who had brains and spines that looked like they were decades older, you know.
Hmm.
And my first thought was, I said, these pictures don't look like the anatomy books, that I studied. And I started questioning. I said, are people biologically aging faster than their chronological age? And the chief resident and everybody said, just read the damn film. Don't pay
Right.
attention. And but it stayed with me. This question is that, wow, we are aging faster. And so I went on this deep dive as why is this happening? Is it us doing it? Is it modern society doing it? What is causing this? So it's took me down, even though my profession was happening on one side, this deep dive into longevity and why all this was happening was going in parallel. And as I went down this journey and I started figuring out that what is all these modern advancements, how they're impacting our health on many, many levels in terms of how our bone structure is aging, how our vessels are aging. And one of the books and articles, they were started talking about how when we were in our primal stage, that all these diseases that we talk about now didn't used to exist because the way we lived was very different. They talked about one of these tribes, the Hadza tribe in Tanzania.
Hmm.
And they said that this tribe, which still exists today, it's one of the last few hunter-gatherer tribes. And they talked about how these guys are such a basic way of life. And because of that, they have very low incidence of everything we're dealing with in terms of chronic diseases, right? Cardiovascular disease, all these mental illnesses and everything like that. And what's interesting is they said that these guys are located in Tanzania. Now, I grew up and my dad was with the United Nations, lived all over the world. I've changed 22 houses in my lifetime and was all over the place. But part of my life in my childhood was in Tanzania. And my dad used to take me on site with him and spend time as he was doing work with these different cultures and tribes. And I used to hang out with these tribes and hang out with their children. They would let me go on little hunts with them and things like that. And so I'm reading this literature on longevity, and it talks about this Hadzabe tribe. And I start looking in the map and I said, where are these guys located? And it turns out the tribe that I hung out with when I was a child was the Hadza tribe. I just didn't know.
Right.
And so everything went full circle where like, oh, I'm reading about longevity, but I actually grew up in the same culture that these tribes are. I experienced it. I grew up as a child in this culture. And so, it brought me this insight. And so then I started cataloging everything into 7 key buckets, which I think may play a big role in how we age. And hence the book is Primal Health Design, which is 7 key paradigms to reverse biological age.
I love the name of the book, Primal Health Design, because it just shows again we are designed to live more that way and not the way we live today. Because the lifestyle that we have does not fit essentially the mammal that we are. We're all mammals with thumbs, right? That's all we are. So your book, I think, is wonderful because it's easy to understand, because there's 7 key paradigms in there to reverse the problems that you, like what you said, you have seen during the time looking at imaging and accelerated aging. So what do you think is the root cause of what you have seen in your time when you did the imaging?
Absolutely. And, if we take a core thesis
Mhm.
that exists and a lot of your work and what you do with the podcast here and the themes that you talk about all align with really what we're talking about here.
Mhm.
And it's that, as you just stated, we have a natural biological design, right? We call it our primal design. Our body is designed to be aligned in a certain way. It's meant to be aligned with like the natural earth cycles in a certain way. Anytime, the core thesis here is that anytime you stray from that primal design, that's when you invite disease. And what we try to do is we try to live so much out of that design and then use external fixes
Mhm.
to fix the problem, right? And that's why it's like, oh, I'm going to engage with technology and I'm going to do all these things so my spine is out of alignment. I'm going to develop this degenerative disease. I'm going to get disc disease. And then I'm going to use surgery to fix my disc. And then I'm going to use all these painkillers and pain treatments and all these injections to fix the pain. To me, that seems so backward, right? Because you don't know what the root cause is. And the root cause is that you just fell out of alignment, you know? And so my key message out of everything that I do is that just figure out your primal design. And if you know that, then the fix is easy because it's just returning to the way you were designed to be. And if you can do that, all of these things that we now treat with surgery and medication and everything like that, we can address it in a much more holistic, natural way.
Yeah. That's what I love about when I looked at even on your website and your book and the way you're talking about it. Holistic is the key word here. You look at a person as a whole. And every time I have someone on the show, especially when they come from a more allopathic medical field, they always figure the same thing out. I have more success with my patients if I look at them as a whole. And it's not just like you said, you look at a brain, well, it's not just a brain. There's a person attached to the brain and it's their lifestyle. So, how do you, coming from more like the Western medicine background, right? Did you get a lot of pushback when you started doing that?
You know, initially, I would say if we went 10 years back, people were not ready to sort of accept this concept that we are a holistic being, right? That everything works together. But now, if you see all the recent kind of discussions and topics, we know that the body and mind, they work together, and so what we're finding is that as science progresses, we know that there is a connection between our mind and our gut. There's this whole connection between the whole microbiome and how it impacts our mood and anxiety. We know that our emotional center, there's this whole company called Heart Math, which talks about like how our emotions are processed through a lot of the nerve plexuses in our our heart region, and how that impacts our cognition and how we think. So all the science now it's pointing to what we knew already is that we are a total being.
Yeah.
Now, when I do sort of like keynotes and talks, one of the things I like to throw out is I say, where do you think your brain is? And obviously, the people would look at me and go, like, what a dumb question. Obviously, it's here, right? Like, yeah, everybody's pointing to their head, and I said, no. I said that is one component, but when you think about like the human nervous system, it's not just here; it's in your whole body. In fact,
Hmm.
there are more nerve connections in your gut than actually in your whole spine. So when you respond, when you think, when you're reacting, you're not just responding with your thoughts and your brain. Your whole body is thinking as a unit. And when you can absorb that concept that I am alive and I'm responding with my whole body, then it changes the paradigm where you realize that, okay, so what happens in my gut impacts how I think, what happens in my emotional centers impacts how I behave. Then we start dealing with ourselves as a totality. And I think that changes the equation.
Hmm. Yeah. And you talk about the seven, right? The seven key paradigms in your book and how to, well, I don't want to say fix them, but if we at least pay attention to them, we can reverse biological age. So, what are those paradigms?
So let's just list the seven very quickly and just
Hmm.
just so people, know what we're talking about. I picked these seven because these were the core elements which just came up over and over again when I studied different cultures and different health practices and everything like that. And I wanted to distill it down to just core elements that people could focus on. A number, people always like numbers, right? Give
Hmm.
me a quantity, a set quantity, right? So the key connections and the paradigms are how we connect with the earth, body, food, how we connect with our mind, purpose, tribe, and ultimately how we connect with our mortality or our finiteness.
Yeah. Well, let's dive deep into this because I can already hear people saying like, I don't know. I don't know about this one. I know about that one. Um, okay, let's talk about one of my favorite phrases when somebody gets really mad or upset. I go touch a blade of grass. Let's dive into that one.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So, the big idea here, Melina, is that, everybody's heard about earthing, grounding, and how that impacts our body in terms of inflammation.
Hmm.
And so one idea about connecting with the earth, which is what we're talking about here, the first connection, is physically connecting with the earth, because it's like there's a whole electrochemical basis behind it. Once you touch the ground, like you said, touch the blade of grass, it impacts your body, reduces inflammation. But then there's this concept is also the earth has all these microbiomes, right? There is life in the earth when it touches your skin is not just skin, right? There's a life. There are things living on your skin. So as soon as
Hmm.
you touch dirt, there is life communicating with life here. And it impacts how your body behaves. And people just you cannot downplay that impact of your life impacting connecting with the life in the soil. It's so important.
Hmm.
There's that one aspect. And the other aspect is that our body is in sync with the cycles of the earth, the circadian rhythm. Okay. And as much as you want to stay up and watch Netflix till like 2 a.m., your biology still follows the circadian rhythm. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So when the sun sets, your body wants to go in this rest and relaxation and recuperation mode, even though you may want to binge watch that series, your body naturally wants to recuperate. And you could get away with ignoring that for some time, but eventually it catches up.
Hmm.
So those are the big takeaways in terms of connecting with that earth element.
Yeah. I've even heard that the microbiome is so sensitive that if we would be sitting in one room together having this interview, your microbiome would influence mine and the other way around because it's everything is so connected.
It is so connected. And you can imagine, they say 1 teaspoon of dirt has more microbiome, more microbes than I think the stars you can see in the sky.
Oh,
And then, and if you think about that, you're like, wow, 1 teaspoon of soil, right? So imagine when you're like stepping on in an open ground, what it is doing to your body.
yeah. Which throwing another controversial comment in there. When we record this, for everybody who doesn't know, we are right before daylight saving times for the USA, and I absolutely hate it. It's like I
I
can't change the clock.
couldn't agree more. What is this concept of artificially switching this time, And I know there's a rhyme and reason behind it, but I just think your body just has this natural cycle. Let's let it do what it does instead of
Yeah,
this artificially kind of setting these times. But yeah, I'm not a big fan either.
yeah, yeah. We should be all in sync with the moon and the earth. It's a perfect calendar as it is, and we screwed it all up. Yeah. Okay, so microbiome, spent more time outside. What about food?
So food is just a different connection. It's just a step up from the earth. And with the food, is the main thing is that are we eating for taste or are we eating for vitality? And that's
Mhm.
a question we got to ask. When I'm putting something in my mouth, I know there's so many savory and tasty sweets and everything out there where, I mean, who doesn't like a nice croissant on like a Saturday morning? I mean, it's just, but in the long run, you got to say, hey, what am I really doing here? What is the food I'm feeding in my body? Like, what is it? How is it adding to my health? Right. And apart from all the micros and macros, which I think there are many people talk about that and then that's been overdone. I think a component that I saw, when I was interacting with these tribes in Africa, most people think that these guys eat a lot of meat because they're out in the out in the
Mhm.
wild hunting, and that's the perception, right? That these guys eat a lot of meat. But one of the things that they found is that the reason these guys were so healthy and had very low disease was that their diet was 70% composed of tubers. Tubers are,
Mhm.
the plants that grow kind of underground, like yucca and other things like that. And what is interesting about tubers, and their diet was 70% tubers. And what is interesting about tubers is that they have a high level of prebiotic fiber.
Mhm.
And when you take a large amount of prebiotic fiber, it feeds the gut microbiome in a phenomenal way. When you feed the gut microbiome like that, when 70% of your diet is tubers, your gut microbiome just flourishes. And it takes care of so many things in your body in terms of your mental health, because we know a lot of the neurotransmitters are being created in your gut.
Mhm.
A lot of we talk about like the gut brain axis, how it
Yeah.
impacts your mood and everything like that. So what they found was they were trying to find out like how come these guys are so healthy, and it turned out it was from their diet, which was predominantly tubers, which was giving that prebiotic fiber to give them that microbiome diversity.
Wow. That's fascinating. And I know that tribe has been, I think, like the most studied one just because they are fairly easily accessible for that kind of stuff. But what about, so I'm trying to envision now how they live, right? Out in the wild, obviously super connected to nature, super connected to their circadian rhythm. Now they're eating all this, I mean, essentially whole food too, right? Whatever the earth gives them, they're eating
Sure.
it. What about movement?
So that brings us to the connection with the body. And when we talk about movement, you look at their life, they're probably walking around 7 to 8 miles a day just because of moving around. Like, either they're foraging for berries and tubers and things like that. And a lot of, they have to really go out from their camp area out to these places, and those are long distances, and
Mhm.
they're walking a lot, and it's just part of their life. It's not like for them, it's not a they're not doing 10,000 steps a day.
Right.
It's like it's that's not the goal, right? Like they don't have that benchmark in their head. I got to do my 10,000 steps. No, it's just life. You just walk, and so one is movement. They're not sitting around all day, which we know sitting is a major issue these days, right? Because of all the impact this has on our body. And, as a radiologist, I see what sitting does to us in terms of our lumbar spine degeneration, disc disease, and everything like that. And much of it comes from our core becoming weak and our
Mhm.
glutes weak. And what is interesting is, I have a lot of friends who do musculoskeletal imaging, and they image people with bad knees every day. And what is interesting is that our core strength and our glute strength changes the biomechanics of how we walk and how
Mhm.
our feet hit the ground. And because of that, a lot of knee problems are actually our core problems and glute problems, and which also has a relation to how of us sitting a lot. So most people don't think and make that connection that you sitting a lot weakens your core, weakens your glutes, which ultimately even leads to knee problems, which I thought was fascinating when we see it on imaging.
Yeah.
So that's why when these guys are walking around all day, they're not having knee problems. You
Mhm.
would think the guy walks around like 7, 8 miles a day, you should have like bad knees. They actually have very healthy knees.
Mhm.
So we learn a lot in terms of movement from that.
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine even when they do sit, they don't sit like we sit. They don't
Oh,
sit on a
no,
weird
eh,
chair.
they are squatting down. In
Mhm.
fact, squatting is a resting posture for
Mhm.
for most of these guys. If you see them, if they're sitting around a fire, they're like squatting next to the fire because that's the most relaxing posture for them. You know, Melina, it's interesting if you look at toddlers,
Mhm.
if you see how they rest, right? They're
Mhm.
squatting down and they're just enjoying that squat, right? And we just lost that ability, right? We think squatting is like this special gym move that we do. Oh, I got to do my squats today.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Squatting is just it's a natural resting posture for many parts of the world.
Yeah. I remember I still have a picture of one of my daughters when she was about maybe 4, and we went to the beach. And she was, what toddlers do at the beach. They dig a hole and they do sandcastles and whatnot. And I said to my husband, "Look at that. Look at how she's squatting. It's the perfect squat. I mean, her butt is almost touching the ground. Her knees are not over her ankles. It is just this natural alignment of her pelvic floor, almost like sinking in and like molding into this. And it's super comfortable for her because she did it for an hour and just sitting there and looking at the seashells, and not moving and not und I would have been like, "Man, my knees are giving out at this point," right? So, yeah, I know people in the health realm that actually started giving up their couches, and they only have blankets in their living room, and they sit on the ground on the living room because even that is a different sitting. It requires different muscle groups than sitting on a chair.
Absolutely. In fact, it's interesting you mentioned that. When I was in India traveling, we went to this one restaurant, and it was a it was a low seating restaurant, which means you sit on the
Mhm,
ground, and the dining table is 15 inches off the ground, and it comes. So you sit and you kind of sit cross-legged, and you eat with this dining table that's 15 inches. And I sat there and go, this is so relaxing.
mhm,
So I had one of my dining tables is a low seating table,
mhm.
and so we sit on the ground and we eat, and it's tremendous for your body because when you sit on a chair versus sitting on the ground, it's just like night and day.
Yeah, it is. It is. I had same thing, same experience. It was a Thai restaurant of all places in Germany, but a very traditional Thai. And they have it's almost like an indentation in the floor. So the
Right.
floor is
It's
lower. Right. You go down a step, you get your legs underneath the table. They call it opium tables, right? And that's where you eat your meal. So I started doing that in my room, but then, got married moved in together, and then all that went out the window, but I should go back to that. So the other paradigm that for me stuck out the most because I think it's the most overlooked in no matter if that's the holistic space or the allopathic space, it doesn't matter. And that was purpose. How does that play into the role of longevity?
So it was interesting. I did a keynote yesterday evening, and we were talking about in the modern age how we're interacting with AI and how AI is impacting us on many different ways. And what is the topic was what is the human edge in this age of AI? And
Mhm,
that was the topic for the evening yesterday. One of the questions was what you just asked me as well. And what we are seeing outside right now, if you look at the corporate arena and the way people working right now, is we hear this term burnout, right?
mhm,
And it's just been talked about. All right, I'm so burned out at my work and whatnot. And what is interesting, what I've found is from my research and just talking to a lot of people, just working in developing corporate programs and everything. The problem is not workload. The problem is actually misalignment. And what I mean by that is that to answer your question of purpose is that when I believe every one of us has a certain core drive. For you, it may be about thought leadership, about getting ideas out. You're more of a like a thinker, connector.
mhm,
My wife is an artist. You can see her work behind me. She's so she's a creator, right? And that's her core drive, right? So what I see is that when people don't connect that core drive with what they're doing every day, your inner self starts suffocating.
mhm,
And that leads to disengagement and that leads to burnout, you know? So the question is not about burnout. The question is, are you aligned in your work? And if you could marry your core drive, whether it's for communication, creativity, with your work, then every day becomes a vacation. Because
yeah,
my wife can do her work like 12 hours a day. And it's just like, she's just we have to like get her out of the studio,
yeah,
because so it's not a burnout issue, it's a misalignment issue.
yeah. Well, it's the I think in the Sanskrit, it's the dharma. It's your dharma. If you don't follow your dharma, they say it leads to sickness, and I think that's
Yes.
exactly what you're
Yes.
saying.
Yes. And I think that your inner self, that part of you, it has a natural constitution, right? It has this natural instinct to be creative, to be communicating, to be a thinker or and then all these
Mhm,
things. If you don't give it room to breathe and express itself, that's what's going to cause that burnout, and in long term, it impacts your health because you create
yeah,
this low grade anxiety, low grade tension in your body. Yep.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, if you do something every single day for the majority of your life, for the
Yeah.
majority of your day, for the majority of your year, week, whatever, that you're not really into, that's yeah, that's very draining.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things we do so we're creating this corporate program. One of the aspects we're implementing is the first thing when we get to this part is we take an inventory of people's values and what people's core drives are. So we have a series of questions that people go through to find out what is their real drive? Like what is that they really value? Is it creativity? Is it communication? It's everything like that. So you got to find out. Forget your job. Don't say I'm this or that. Just
Mhm.
find out who you are as a person and what is it that you really want to express and what is the highest value for you. And then we try to seize that is your work aligned with that core drive. Because if it's not, it's going to cause this constant tension going forward. And then so we try to align that for people.
Yeah, that's amazing to even look at that. Okay, so we had movement, food, circadian rhythm, purpose. What did we forget?
Yes. So we have connection with our mind. The big idea here, Melina, is if you look at any disease, and if you look at the word dis-ease, it's just dis-ease, meaning when you're not at ease, you
Mm,
have disease, right? So the idea becomes is that why are you not at ease? And that I think is underpins this whole concept of connection with the mind, right? Without getting, I look at brains all day and we can get very cerebral about the brain structures and this and that, but to package it very simply is that I believe the biggest thing lacking in this day and age for most people, with all the social media scrolling and shorts and likes and whatnot, you know, we're task switching every 47 seconds.
mhm,
That's the average, right? The human attention span, okay, with everything going on, has come down to 8 seconds, right? That's I tell people that's less than a goldfish, right? It's so you think about that. If that's your attention span and you're task switching, where is the stillness, right? And and if you don't have stillness, then you open up this room for illness, and I
mhm.
think if there's the main takeaway from this conversation is I think if people can remember that one sentence, you have a choice between stillness versus illness in any moment. And if you can do things with that ease and stillness, you avoid all that commotion and all that illness. Because ultimately, it's the chronic anxiety that is going to really impact your body. We find that people who have this chronic anxiety, their cortisol is always kind of on the high end. It impacts how you age. We know that high cortisol impacts your telomeres and ages you faster. Okay, and that's getting too technical. If you can just remember that the takeaway here is that are you in stillness or not?
Yeah,
And when you scroll and do all this and shorts and likes and everything like that, if that is taking away your stillness, in the long run, it's going to impact your health.
yeah. Amen. Man. And I remember the day I found out that multitasking was a myth. I felt so validated because, yeah, I always called myself a multitasker, but I couldn't retain the information that if there was a task that, was about receiving and processing information, and it's your brain just switches real quick, but it actually doesn't do two things at once. It never does. So my kids are now teenagers and they do this horrible, horrible, horrible thing. They listen to an audiobook on, mind you, 2 times speed. They don't even listen to it on normal speed. It's 2 times speed while they're doing homework. And I'm like, "No. It's either A, you don't realize what's happening in the audiobook, or B, you're not going to retain the information that you learned from your homework. Please stop and don't listen to it on 2 times speed." Yeah.
I love that you said that. Multitasking is a myth. You're just monotasking very poorly.
Mhm.
Right? You're just monotasking very poorly. And an added layer to what you just said, when we talk about, as I work with people in corporate and we were talk about this multitasking myth. But the other thing that people don't realize is that if you're constantly switching tasks, you never really leverage the ability of your mind to actually focus. And what we know is that when you can have focused attention for some time, then you enter this space of what we call as deep work or flow state. And a flow state or deep work state is where your analytical mind shuts down and you're in this space where your mind is in this railroad track where it can just do that activity in a very efficient way. This is when you start developing that skill set. When you talk about how does somebody become a concert pianist, right? It is because they go from that focused attention to that flow state where they're not thinking about playing piano anymore.
Mhm.
Their fingers move without them thinking.
Mhm.
So if we're constantly multitasking, you never experience that deep work space. You will never develop those qualities. You'll never be able to experience that your ability of your brain to do this, you know?
Mhm.
And so it's a big loss for people.
Yeah.
And so one of the things in corporate we're really trying to reel back is we're getting people to pick one or two activities that they really want to become an expert at and say that let's give it some committed time.
Mhm.
Let's give it 90 minutes of work on this one activity so you start becoming that concert pianist in that activity.
Mm.
And
Deep
and
work.
it's really transforms how people work.
Yeah. Yeah, that deep work without anything else around you. And I think we're, kind of addicted to it almost, that constant inflammation information flow that we have and constantly trying to be everywhere because, we have a hustle, 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 hustle culture, really. And I remember we had a challenge in our yoga family and said, "Okay, you need to walk every day. No headphones, no podcast, no music. You are just gonna listen to nature." And I felt like a toddler that just got his lollipop taken away. I was really mad. I was like, "But that's such a waste of time. I could learn things with an audiobook while I do this, right?" And it's like, "No, that's exactly the goal." Like, stop. Stop having all of this coming into your brain. Just walk. You're just gonna walk. And it was hard at first, but then it was meditative.
You know, several years ago, I was actually struggling with this for some time because, you know, in radiology, it's 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 a very busy work. You know, we're getting stroke alerts, we're getting all these calls from the floor to look at
Mhm.
this, that, you know, people, you know, it's a constant, you know, task switching and responding to alerts and everything like that. And it was impacting my mental health where I was just, kind of constantly on. You can relate to what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
And then when I started reading this research and about deep work and meditation, and I said, okay, wow, I said, I got to, I got to figure this out because, and this is when I was really started digging deep into this research on longevity. I said, I know this is supposed to be good for me and to really learn to shut off. So I wound up going to this silence camp, and it was in this place in India, and there was a big ramp up period. You had to build up to it. Like it's almost 18 months of preparation before you could do this. And it was going through all these procedures. But anyway, the when I got to this camp, it was 8 days of silence, which means I had no internet connection, no books, no TV, no connection with any of my family members. We weren't able to even talk to one another. Silence. It's you, and that's it. And the space where it has nothing there, it was just white space. And I tell you, like 5 days into it, I was going nuts. I was like, I cannot do this. I was like, and some people were breaking down. They were like talking to themselves and things like
Mhm.
that. But the seventh day, I would say this unbelievable stillness descended because I had none of this input and my mind just like settled down. And it was this stillness that even to this day, I'm like, I got goosebumps because it's like,
Mhm.
it was this space that I entered and I said, "Oh my God." I said, like, I cannot believe that this actually exists. It was this such a deep silence that I could be in. And then since that day, I maintain a daily stillness practice. And it's something I do every morning, to address this kind of idea of connecting with the mind. I think you have to give it that white space because
Mhm.
it will do wonders for your body and your mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. We had an episode about meditation, and Christina was on the show, and she said, if this all is very overwhelming for you, and you cannot even imagine yourself meditating, or you're like, oh, this is not for me, it never works, whatever it is, she said, wash your dishes. Just wash your dishes. and be really, really lovely with your dishes. Get really into it. Feel the water, feel the foam, feel the dish, your whatever sponge you're using. Close your eyes. So, how does it smell? How does it feel? How does it sound? Really get into that one task. And obviously, 5-minute dishwashing session now becomes like 20-minute dishwashing session, right? And she said sometimes just as even though there's it's not completely stillness, but you're just doing this one thing, and because it's such an mundane task, you don't feel like you're losing anything out of it, and it can take that anxiety away a little bit, and that's like a gateway into then expanding to other things, and I thought that was beautiful. So every once in a while, I do that, where I just get into some weird thing, but I do it very intensely and, with no distractions about it. But it's definitely hard, and I love what you're saying about that you actually went somewhere too to have this done, because doing this in your own home is gonna be very difficult because people try to talk to you, and there is the TV running, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and these it's hard to shut off.
Mhm.
I think I just wrote a recent blog, and it's on like how we're constantly on. We don't know where our off switch is.
Yeah.
That is the problem, and you got to find your off switch. You have to find your off switch and learn how to turn, flip on that off switch, when it's time. Because if you do not do that, you're constantly on, and everything seems important, right? Yeah, I want to check my social media. I want to check my everything seems important, but in the long run, you got to realize that what's the end result? Like, what am I chasing here?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I think to keep that balance, you have to find that off switch.
Mhm. And not feel guilty about your off switch. I think
Hmm.
a lot of people struggle with that too. They feel guilty. They're like, "Oh, I can't be off because then, what if something happens or I miss something?" The whole like FOMO thing and that we have, fear of missing out. Yeah, no guilt and no shame. It's the same analogy with the whole that analogy comes up all the time. The oxygen mask in the airplane,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
If you don't find your off switch and actually use it with no guilt and no shame about it, you're not going to be the best version of yourself for the people around you. So you're actually hurting them more, and you're going to miss out on more than if you use that off switch now.
And um and another layer to that, Melina, is that what I found, after this experience, and then I have this daily stillness practice. And then the science says that when you have that type of stillness, and you kind of, preferably if you could do it first thing in the morning, right? Because that's when your brain is kind of
Mhm.
coming out of that alpha state, and that you impact the rest of your day. And I tell people that you don't meditate. Meditation is hard for people. I don't
Mhm.
even like to use the term meditation, because actually I think people, if you use focused attention, maybe that's better. Focus on something like your breath, and you said focus on doing your dishes. Maybe focused attention is what people need, and
Yeah.
forget about meditation. Okay. But what I say that even if you have that, and all of those are fall under stillness practices, right? If you do that first thing in the morning, what we found is that your level of cortisol during the day, that 20 minutes of meditation or stillness practice or focused attention will impact your cortisol for the rest of your day. So you're not meditating for the 20 minutes, you're meditating for the 23 hours and
Yeah.
40 minutes for the rest of your day. If you know that 20 minutes impacts all of that, then you see the value in shutting off for the 20 minutes, right? Because what I saw was when I do that, I'm able to respond rather than react to people. I
Mhm.
have this space. When somebody said something to me, it's not like I come back with a retort. I'm able to just stay in my space and say, okay, is this worth responding to? How do I want to respond to it? Or, is it not even worth my time? And I can just nine times out of 10, I just let things go. And I said, that's fine. And my favorite line for most people is, you're right. Because I think that's what people want to hear. And to me, even though I know I can say a lot of things that make contradict what they're saying,
Yeah.
I have to choose. Is it worth losing my stillness over that one argument? And for me, the easiest thing now is like, yeah, you're right. I just let it go.
Yeah. Which just shows that you value your peace.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Which other points for longevity? Did we hit them all?
So two more, and then so one is that the idea of tribe, connection with tribe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's a big one. We know that the longest running study, like the Harvard study, if you know about that, talks, it looked at all these factors about, you smoking, your lifestyle, exercise, and everything like that. They found the greatest impact on your life from all these factors that we've talked about right now. The number one factor was your quality of relationships and
Yeah.
how that impacts your health, right? So if we know that, if that's the truth, then we got to pay attention to that factor. Is that how are we interacting with people? You know, one is, obviously your partner, your significant other. That's a the big part of it, right? But the other is that, who's in your inner circle,
Mm-hmm.
who's in your tribe. And, when I grew up with this tribal cultures and whatnot, it was such a close knit community. And that sense of security, that sense of belonging, it impacts your biology. Belonging impacts your biology, and when you don't have belonging, it also impacts your biology. And if you look at right now, there is this epidemic of loneliness, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this world, because people are connected to their digital friend and their digital connections, but it's not giving them that true belonging, And so you got to implement that and then create that tribe for yourself, because that's going to ultimately impact how you age.
Yeah. When they say it takes a village to raise a child, and I see so many moms with postpartum depression and all of that stuff, or even when we get older and we go through other life changes, it's like it really is. We really do need a village, but we don't have that village anymore. We have to do all of it ourselves. And I see the same thing with men. The other day I saw, in our church, they have like a group only for men. And I thought, this is wonderful. Yeah, let those guys be together and have their thing. And then the women be together, but then also a mixed group and whatever. You have to have the community. And I'm sure that, people that might listen today, they might be familiar with the blue zones, right? Everybody is all raving about the blue zones. Well, actually, the only thing they all have in common is that they are all needed. They are part of their society. They still do, I don't know, they're 80 years old and still chop wood because they are part of their multi-generation, whatever, either house or village. They all live close together. They need each other. That keeps you young. That keeps you really young.
Absolutely. And you raised a great point as men struggle with this more
Mhm.
because I think women are naturally social.
Yes.
You put, now I tell my wife, and she goes to the gym and she goes to the locker room and she's like, we talked about this and that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
when men are in the locker room, we are not talking about any of that stuff. I said, like,
Right.
we go into the locker room, we're doing our shower, we're getting out of there. We're like,
Mhm.
none of that comes up. And so women are naturally social. So this idea of loneliness, I think it impacts men, but men don't even want to talk about being lonely, and I had to I have to really work on that because I can do a lot of things alone, and I struggle with a lot of things on my own and in my head, and I don't want to really share it with anybody, and even not sometimes even with my wife, because I'm like I'm just going to deal with it. um, but then I found, I think that it's so important to have that inner circle, that have that tribe where you can share ideas, exchange ideas, because everybody's dealing with something, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's dealing with something. Either it's, with how you're raising your kids, it's your own kind of personal health, and as you're growing and getting older and everything like that. But if you're not able to communicate that and share that, I think it's a big loss.
Yes. Yes. And you're right, I see this all the time that men I even sometimes I ask my husband, I'm like, "Do you have someone you talk to?" He's like, "Yeah, but it's I mean, it's on the phone because everybody, lives scattered across the world, which that's fine. If you need to do that, that's fine, but we don't have that, like, that tribal you live in a close-knit compound, and the guys can sit around the fire at night and exchange their whatever, either their day or long lost stories or whatever. It's kinda sad that we don't have that. So,
Yes.
yeah. Okay. What's the next one? You guide me. I lost
So,
track.
so the last piece, and I think this is interesting because this is kind of like the capstone of kind of like this whole model, and I, I what I found is that the last piece is connecting with our finiteness, and it's most of us, the way we live, we think the way we behave, we think we're going to live forever.
Mhm.
And I think that when you think that you have an infinite life, right, then every day this is just another day, right? It's just because there are going to be endless days. So why make this day special, right? So everything becomes transactional. Everything is all about like what's in it for me. It's when you think you have an infinite life, you make very finite decisions. It's all about you, and it's all about like what is my take in this, what is my gain in this. But when you realize that you have a finite life, let's say you realize you only have a week, you're going to make those 7 days count,
Mhm.
right? And if you look at the human lifespan, let's say everybody lives 110, Emma, which is like then um but even 100 years, it's not a long time span. Right. And so if you subtract your age from 100 and you look at the balance and you say, okay, that's my time, that should give you the same feeling of that 7 days. Right. And you could say, okay, out of that day, this is one of those days, and I got to make this count. Right. So now when you know you have a finite life, when you have a finite life, you start making infinite decisions. You're like, what is something I can do today that's going to live on forever? What is the legacy? What is the greater impact? And
Yeah.
you start chasing things that are going to live beyond you because you realize that you have a very finite time. And it changes how you live every day, you know? And I thought that when I hit upon this element, I thought, that's it. That is what is lacking, because the reason people are able to scroll and doom scroll for like 2 hours is because you don't think today is important, because you think I have endless tomorrows. The
Right.
important things I will do tomorrow because today I can doom scroll. Well, guess what? It is a finite life.
Yeah.
You got to make today count, and you got to make today count so that it impacts and has some level of legacy. And so when I changed that mindset and really kept that in the forefront, it made every day very important. And then I think if you wake up each day and say, can I make today count? You will treat people differently, you will behave differently, you will chase things that really matter rather than chasing all this frivolous things that we do all day. So
Mhm.
so that it really changed my life.
Yeah. And it seems like that particular one feeds into all the other ones because like you said, your decisions every 5 minutes that you're making, because we make a lot of decisions every day, they change. They become more valuable. You don't make those even if we go back to food, it's this, am I going to eat this piece of garbage or am I going to eat this Whole Foods? Because then that's going to lead up to other things, the whole tribal thing and the purpose thing and all of that feeds into that and or it comes from that and gets fed by that. So that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and also, and it ties everything, like you mentioned about food. When I started thinking that, why do I want to eat healthy in the first place, right? Like, is
Mm,
it because I'm going to feel good? Yes. But I started thinking that if I don't eat healthy, I'm not going to be here to support my wife and kids
mhm.
and in the long run. And so I'm taking that away from them for this little pizza. You know what I'm saying? Is that worth it. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying I don't eat pizza or anything like that. I think once in a while you got to keep a balance. I'm more of a 80-20 kind of a person where I think that you got to eat healthy 80% of the time and have
Mhm.
some play. If every day it's a pattern, it's an issue. But what I'm thinking is, if in the back of your head, if your health is not just about you feeling good, but when you think about this legacy and about supporting your family and being there for your kids, then it changes how you really make those decisions, right? And so I approach everything that way now. It's just that, I got a limited amount of time. I'm going to make this day count. I'm going to make this meal count. I'm going to make this interaction here. We're talking on this podcast. I want to make this count so that
Mhm.
people can be impacted. People can listen to this and maybe they can change some things in their life. And if that impacts them, I'm so happy.
Yeah. It's striving for greatness every day.
Yes.
Yeah. I have picked something up on your website that I would like you to talk about. So I don't even I'm going to butcher this word because I have no idea how to pronounce that. But you have discussed things like urolithin A? Do I say that right?
So, there are many things like that, but these are like new age supplements that what we're finding is people are trying to find things to, like I said, biohack, like the
Mm,
body and that, and I think that to simplify this, I would say that the part of this is coming from all of these things is that if we ate a very natural diet, right? Like, let's say we ate, lot of things that come from the ground and lot of like organic meats and things like that. People were getting all these micronutrients and then some of these components. And nowadays, like creatine is a big thing because we know it impacts our brain
mhm.
and everything like that. People are trying to eat more. But, creatine is a naturally occurring substance, just like uracil A. But that now our diet patterns, because of all the processed foods and all that, we're not getting what was already there, right?
Yeah.
And now, because once we start supplementing with what was already in our diet, in our primal diet, people say like, wow, now this makes me feel better or life improves and all that. But it's not rocket science. It's something that was already there. It's just we took it away by eating all these processed foods, which has nothing in it. And so the takeaway message here is that, this whole idea of primal health design, right, is that what was our primal diet? What is the basic diet that we were designed to, how we were designed to move in our natural form? What is our alignment with the earth and the natural cycles? And in terms of our mind, is how does it naturally like to be? You know?
Yeah.
So that would be the sum of it, is that what is our primal design?
I could not agree with you more. I absolutely love this because at the end of the day, too, everything you're teaching, guess what? It's free. Oh my goodness. If you go to bed early, that's free. You wake up on time with the sunrise, that's free. Right? You touch a blade of grass outside, free.
Yeah.
It's like
But people need like a two scientific papers proving
yes.
it before they make the change. Like, you can you can say all that, and then
Yep.
you're like, no, but the study from Harvard Medicine said, and they're
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, now I think I should do it. Well,
Mhm.
this is how you are naturally designed to
Yes.
be. So, but that's I think that's my main crux of my message, is that I think if your body wants to heal itself, it is
Mhm.
ready to just return back to its natural health. It's just that you got to just remove that resistance and just say, oh, okay, this is what it wants. Let's bring it back to where it was. Just bring it back to its primal form. And you'll see things transform in your body.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think people don't do it enough because first of all, like what you said, it's not scientific enough. It's way too easy. People don't go for the easy stuff, right? And then it's not sexy. I'm sorry. When I tell you to just eat healthy and move more, that's like, "Bleh," right? Yeah, okay, whatever. I am a certified health coach and I don't take, clients anymore. But obviously, friends and family, they always come and have questions and ask, "Well, what should I do about this? And what should I do about that?" And it's always I always have the same answer. "How do you eat? How much do you sleep?" And they're like, Yeah, but can I not just take like a good supplement? No, you cannot take a good supplement and buy yourself out of the core principles and your basic standards. You cannot, like you said, biohack your way out of sleep and food and water and movement and just the basic things on what you are. You're a mammal. That's what you are.
I think a good approach for most people, and I work with people in the corporate and whatnot. I tell people this is that you got to look at your day and figure out what do you have control over. And I believe that people have a bit of time first thing in the morning that they have control over, and then how they end their day they have control over. The beginning of their day and the end of their day. And I say a easy fix is that really fine tune how you begin your day and you end your day
Hmm.
with all these elements that we just talked about. How you start your day and you end your day. In between, all hell can break loose, as you know. If you have kids and you have a job and your active career and you're doing, your podcasts and you're doing things for social media and promotion and filming and this and that, it's total chaos, right? But if if you find those two pillars, beginning and the end of the day, I tell you, it's like a suspension bridge. If you have strong supports on both ends, you can handle any amount of weight in the middle. But if you lose those supports, this whole thing can come crashing down,
Hmm.
and so you got to fine tune, those two ends.
That's great. That's great advice because that's the number one reason I think that people are not doing what they're supposed to do because they don't have time. And it's not that I'm not saying it's an excuse because it's not. I understand when people are working a lot of hours and it's hard. It's really hard. But I love that you said you have control over these periods of your day where then you can make a decision. Yeah. All right. Where can people find you to find out more and buy your book?
Sure. Book is everywhere. It's on Amazon. It's Primal Health Design. In that, I talk about developing these AM and PM habits.
Hmm.
And I think it's unique for everybody. So the listeners here, if you go through the book, it will give you a framework to develop your own AM and PM pillars, which really are unique to everyone. My website is kavinmistrymd.com, KavinMistrymD.com. And you probably see it in the link. But on there, you'll see the link for the book. But also, for people who need some more personal coaching, I developed an online course, and which is you get a master class for me, giving you 10 minutes each day to fine tune these 7 elements in your body. And it's 21 days of a master class where we develop this whole paradigm for your life. And then you can develop these healthy habits. And it's about really you returning back to yourself.
Mm.
That's the goal. And so the website is there, the book is there. And if you connect with me on Instagram or LinkedIn, would love to hear from you and love to hear some feedback. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to put everything in the show notes for everybody to find. And I love that how you describe the master class. It's self-paced. And like you said, everybody has 10 minutes a day, right? So bite-sized information. All right. This was fantastic. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
on the show.
Love the interaction. I think we're both on the same path, and from different angles. And it's funny because, everybody hits upon the same truth just from different angles, but
Yeah.
ultimately it's really, like you said, you cannot biohack your way out of misalignment, right?
Hmm.
The answer is alignment, and I hope that people listening to this, you just align with who you are, who your primal self is. And then I think it'll solve a lot of issues in your life.
Yeah. And we all want to live longer, but also healthy, good quality of life until the last breath and not, living long, but not well.
The
So,
health span and lifespan at the same
ex-
time. Sure.
yep,
Yeah.
exactly. All right, y'all. It's my birthday today. I'm recording on my birthday. So you give me a birthday gift and you subscribe. You subscribe to wherever you are and find Dr. Kavin in the show notes and find his stuff, find his book where it's explained and you can follow this very easily and you can just live a better life and you deserve a better life. You deserve to have high quality of life and your family does too. Tune in again next Monday. See ya. Bye.
Thank you so much for being here with me today. Leave a comment, give it a thumbs up, a review, and share it with somebody you think needs this. Have a fabulous day. See you next time.